Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to our College Sports Communicators live webinar. We are pleased to offer this session on working with men's lacrosse statistics, stat rules, and producing accurate statistics. Thanks again for joining us on this important discussion as we look at ways to assist CSC members in all areas of working with men's lacrosse statistics and rules. Our presenters today are leaders in college lacrosse communications and statistics, and they are here to offer their insight and expertise. First and foremost, I want to emphasize at any time, please ask questions in the Q&A. I can't emphasize that enough. Q&A function is live, and we'll be going to that frequently over the next hour. For those of you that I don't know, my name is Ernie LaRasa. I am the Director of Athletic Communications at Johns Hopkins. This is my 27th year at Hopkins, and I've worked with our men's lacrosse program throughout my time here at Hopkins, and I will serve as the moderator this afternoon. As a reminder, we are recording this webinar. And later on this afternoon on the CSC website and YouTube page, you can watch this as an on-demand option. And we ask you to please share this with any of your colleagues that could not attend live. If you have a way to communicate with them right now and you want to let them know that we've started, please feel free to do so. So we have a lot to cover. We'd like to get started. Again, thank you for taking the time to join us. I want to introduce our panelists today. We have three people with us that are going to be here to answer all of your questions and provide some insight. First is John Stark. He is Assistant Director of Athletic Communications at Syracuse. He's in his 20th season of college lacrosse, including his 16th as an SID. He was a four-year player. Fun fact about John, he has run at least 1 mile every day for 2,231 consecutive days. John, thanks so much for being with us today. Stacy Michaud. Yep, Stacy Michaud is the Assistant Athletic Director for Sports Information at the United States Naval Academy. She is her 26th year at Navy and has worked with the men's lacrosse program since arriving there in Annapolis. Fun fact about Stacy, she hails from the lacrosse hotbed of Iowa. Jerry Price is the senior writer and historian at Princeton and has worked with the men's lacrosse program there since 1990. So this is Jerry's 35th year of Tiger lacrosse. He has been the head statistician at men's lacrosse championship weekend on Memorial Day weekend since 2005. Fun fact about Jerry, Jerry is an accomplished author and has published 2 books. We'll let you know that Ryan Eigenbrod from Loyola, Maryland was supposed to be on this panel, but Ryan is sick today, so he is unable to join us. So these are our lacrosse experts. What we're going to do is we're going to run through a lot of different areas and a lot of the stats that you keep in men's lacrosse. First and foremost, I want to emphasize men's and women's lacrosse are different. They are not statted the same way in many instances. I believe a webinar like this will be following in the near future for the women. And I encourage you, if you have men's and women's lacrosse and you are new to the sport, to please log on to that one as well, as you'll notice some pretty distinct differences in the way some things are kept. So what we're going to roll through, we're going to hit some topics. There's a Q&A chat room. I really encourage all of you to use that to communicate with us so we can hit a lot of your questions during the course of this time. But we'll roll through some topics we think are important, and we'll go from there. So the first thing we want to talk about, and if you've done some of these webinars that are on the CSC website in other sports, first thing we want to talk about is pregame prep. So how do you prepare to host a lacrosse game as a host sports information director? So if we can just go through and Stacy, John, and Jerry will ask you, just let us know the things that people should be aware of as they prepare to host a game. So Stacy, we'll start with you.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for everybody for hopping on. We did something like this last year and seemed well received. Before I hop right into maybe some things to be prepared for, I am from Iowa. I had seen one men's lacrosse game in person prior to coming here, so I knew nothing. And I know that there are a lot of you out there that are probably in that same situation. Unless you were brought up in the Northeast, you probably have not seen lacrosse, or maybe you've seen some of it, but you don't know really what you're doing right now. It's okay. I relied on Jerry Price. I relied on Ernie. I relied on some different folks that have moved up in athletics over the years that were great resources for me. Use us. Do not be afraid. Last year we had a bunch of people that reached out to each one of us with, any and all questions. No question, as they say, the only dumb question is the one that's not asked. So please, please, please use us. We're happy to help. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that I would be, a panelist talking about lacrosse back in the day, but it's a great sport and we're willing to help. So that's first and foremost. In terms of game preparation, all that fun type of stuff. We play at our football stadium. We're really lucky in that we have a great facility. But because we play in our football stadium, which is a 34,000 seat facility, we are far away from the scorers table, from the sideline. So first thing, make sure you have communication, walkie-talkies. You have somebody at the table that can call up penalties, is counting down the penalty time, whether you have it on if you have a facility where you can put it on the video board, great, but you still need somebody down there to make sure that you're releasing the person in proper time, and also giving the information up to your SIDs that are keeping track. But we are lucky. We have plenty of people to help. We have an inputter. There's myself as the lead caller, and we have another person there as well to, hectic plays happen, and you need somebody, a player is turned kind of a funky way and you need another set of eyes, but you can't just stop, so it's nice to have another person in cases where, you can't see a number. So you put a placeholder in and just say team, and you continue to call, and that secondary caller or helper can look and see what that number is and be able to come back when you have a moment of downtime to be able to replace that team with an actual player number. So I guess I'll pass it off. I don't want to hog up everybody's time, but we all have different situations. I understand we're not all playing at a football stadium. When I first started here, we were on a card table sitting right behind the box. So you can do it no matter the situation, and we're all here to help you.
Yeah, so let's go to a little bit of a smaller facility. We'll go, instead of John, we'll go to Jerry real quick. Jerry, you're playing in a little bit of a smaller setup than a football stadium, a little bit more like Homewood here at Hopkins. So tell us a little bit about your setup, your crew, and how you manage game day from a stat standpoint.
Yeah, so we have a very small facility. It's 2,500 seats. It's lacrosse only. We have a tiny press box. It's smaller than your average high school press box. We have 3 people on our stat crew. We have one person who enters. We have one person who calls. Usually I'm the person who calls. And then we have one person who watches the video stream of the game. And that person is in charge of looking at either replays or just rewinding it to see if we missed something. So things can happen quickly. If you, in most games on all levels, have some sort of video streaming. So if you can have the stream going live in your press box and somebody who's assigned to watch it, because your tendency is, all right, well, was that number 11 or number 17? And as you're looking at that, the play has continued and you've missed 2 other things. So then when you have somebody who can do the replay, they can go back and say, yeah, that was number 17, or that shot hit the post, or the goalie didn't get a piece of that, or whatever. And then you can go back and catch up later. So for us, it's 3 people plus a 4th person who's doing social media, but that's not really part of the stat crew. It's 3 people, somebody who enters, somebody who calls, and somebody's looking at the replay.
John, anything different you want to offer? I know at Syracuse, sports no bigger anywhere in the country than it is at Syracuse. And when we go there, I know I don't have to worry about a thing. You have a great crew and they're all trained well.
Yeah, I think we're lucky in that we have that ability to have a stat crew dedicated. So an inputter, a caller, and a second spotter if we have somebody. And participation too, I think is the big one, because as we know, just because you get into the game and you don't generate a stat, you're not going to get that participation. So often we have students definitely doing ours, and the opponent. And if the opposing SID is there, they know their teams better than anybody else. To mark off participation when somebody gets into the game, it may not generate a stat. That is definitely the big one. It saves a ton of emails on Monday, or a kid coming up to you after, like, hey, I played, how come I didn't get credit for this game? It saves there. So if you can, definitely three places to focus on your stat crew. And like Jerry said, if you have that stream, that helps so much. And building in that placeholder, like Stacy said, I think that's so big. Like, just get to the next play. Like, you go shot, save, ground ball, shot, goal. Trying to get that second ground ball in there is important. If you can just get the placeholder and move on and then come back to it, I think that's super helpful. And print the stat manual. I see Stacy's got hers printed there as well. So learn the rules. There's a ton of great situations in there and some different things. And having that with you on game day and knowing how things are going to get scored is going to be super important.
I would agree. Definitely take some time to review that, especially if you handle men's and women's lacrosse, because again, they are scored differently in some situations. And, it's not uncommon for me to email John or Stacy or Jerry on a Saturday during a game, or text them or after a game. Like, there are times where there are just things that happen and I'm like, how would you have done this? This is what we did. So don't ever be afraid to do that. Before, during a game. So wanted to talk a little bit about some of the basics. And I will say, I think all of us use Stat Crew. I know Presto offers a lacrosse scoring option. We're not going to go in depth on how you actually score things in the programs. There are a couple instances where I think we will touch on them because it does affect how the game actually, how it is statted. But they are different. I will say that Genius is coming. I don't know when, but hopefully we can all see that sooner rather than later, so that we can all go to a uniform program in the near future. Wanted to talk a little bit about rules. There are a couple of rule changes this year, and as some of us know, Jerry is actually a member of the NCAA Men's Lacrosse Rules Committee. So Jerry, if you want to hit on a couple of things this year that are new, I know that the helmet off situation is probably going to catch a lot of our 178 participants as of right now by surprise. So if you want to touch on that, that would be great.
Sure. So the first thing I would say is, if you're new to lacrosse, go through the rule book and get a sense of what the rules are, and it helps you stat if you know what to expect. As far as this year is concerned, rules are done in 2-year cycles. This was not a change year for rules, but we were able to make 2 changes based on player safety. One of them is, if the helmet comes off of a player, the whistle will blow immediately. If the player is on offense, whoever the player is whose helmet came off has to leave the field within 20 seconds, and play will restart after 20 seconds. So this is not a quick restart. It's not like a loose ball push. You pick up the ball and you start going the other way. It's a 20-second count by the officials. So both teams will have a chance to be set before the game starts again. If the offensive player loses his helmet, it's a change of possession. If the ball is loose when the helmet comes off, then the player whose helmet came off, the other team gets possession. And if the defense's helmet comes off, it's a 30-second time-serving penalty. To enter that penalty, there is no code in Stat Crew, and I'm not sure about Presto either, but in Stat Crew, there's no "your helmet came off" code. So you can just call it illegal equipment or delay of game, one of those. The whole point is that helmets don't come off if they're properly strapped on. Players have gotten a little loose with that, and helmets are coming off all over the place. So it's a player safety thing to try to prevent players from having their helmet come off. If that happens on a face-off, does not count as a face-off violation. So at least it doesn't yet. We're going to review that as the season goes along. But for now, you can't have a face-off violation due to a helmet coming off. If the helmet comes off as the result of illegal contact from the other team, then the player's helmet came off has to leave the field until the next dead ball. But that is not a violation or a penalty on them, because the illegal contact penalty will supersede that. They're not even simultaneous penalties. So if you get hit and your helmet comes off and the official throws a flag for illegal body check, unnecessary roughness, whatever the call is, then that penalty will stand. The player's helmet came off does not get penalized, but does have to leave the field. The other is replay. Replay has existed in a very small form in the NCAA Division I championships, and that's it. It's been expanded to include any regular season game. Now, the technology differs greatly between all levels of lacrosse. Not every conference, not every school is going to be using replay. In fact, I would guess that the majority will not be using it. If you are using replay, the main thing you have to keep in mind in statting is replay can be used in two circumstances. One is something to do with play around the crease and goals. These are situations where a coach can challenge. They have two challenges for the game. If you challenge, one per half, if you challenge and you lose a timeout. So coaches are going to be a little hesitant to challenge because they don't want to lose their timeouts. Then play will continue if there's no goal or there's no call in the crease. Play is now continued the other way. The coach has 30 seconds to challenge the play. If the coach challenges it and review happens and the call on the field is overturned, then none of the stats that happened after that count. Even if it's a goal, no matter what it is, all those stats come off and you go back to the point where the play was incorrectly called, and only those stats count. There is only one exception to that. If there's a flag down, a coach's challenge flag on the field, play continues, and there's a penalty called, that penalty will stand. So if there's an unnecessary roughness or any kind of penalty like that, that play will stand even if the call on the field is overturned. So that is that's the rule. The question is, leaves the field until the next dead ball. Who adjudicates that? The officials do. So what's going to happen is the officials are going to blow the whistle. Player's going to leave the field. He has 20 seconds to get off the field. Both teams are now set. They'll replay the whistle to start. Play will go. And then if the ball goes out of bounds or if there's a violation or anything that forces the whistle to blow, at that point, the player is allowed to come back onto the field. And as far as your involvement in replay, it should be minimal. It should fall to the officials and to the multimedia people. But we're all gonna get dragged into that at some point. So be aware of the rules. Be aware what's challengeable and not challengeable. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Yeah, I certainly feel like
feel free to ask.
Certainly feel like that's a small group of people, like Jerry said, that will probably do that this year. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But observing it from afar and learning from how it is managed in those situations where it does take place is good. Jerry, one question for you that I have, because we've talked about that situation with the helmet off, the turnover. Who gets the turnover? Is it a personal turnover? Or are we going to score that as a team turnover? Helmet comes off. I don't think we made a determination for that.
So this would be the same as any other piece of equipment that comes off.
Okay.
If you're not allowed to play without your equipment. In other situations where equipment comes off, you have the choice to continue to play, which is a violation, or simply turn and run off the field. If you continue to play and it's a violation and you're on offense, then you're the one charged with a turnover. So the player's helmet came off would get charged with a turnover. And the question is, can I repeat what happens on a loose ball if a player's helmet comes off? If the ball is loose and the helmet comes off, the team whose helmet came off, the other team will have possession. So if that team was on defense, then it's a turnover. If the team who loses their helmet was on offense, then that would be a turnover, but it would not be a time-serving penalty. And if the team on defense loses their helmet while the ball is loose, then that is nothing. It's just continuation of the possession for the offense. But
right.
The one thing it would do is it would reset the shot clock to 60 if it was 60 or under, or 80 if it was between 80 and 60.
Okay. Great. Well, thanks for going through that, Jerry. I appreciate all of your efforts on the rules committee. I know it's great to have an ally there that looks at things like we may look at them in game while we're scoring. So I see a question popping in. So we're gonna hold a couple of those, but we're gonna go through our list here. And it's a great question, but I think there's a point in this discussion where we're gonna hit a little bit on that. So we're gonna start off like pregame. So we're gonna talk about starters and participation. And Stacy loves this topic, so we're gonna let Stacy take the lead on who the official starters are in a men's lacrosse game. Stace?
I absolutely will. One thing I will say, I know not everybody is utilizing the whole replay situation, but we are one school that plans to utilize it for conference and non-conference. We've already had a request from one of the officials to have our people that are handling the replay come down and just have a conversation with them about 45 minutes before the game. So that might be something that you pass on to your video review folks, for those of you that are planning on doing that. Probably a good thing for this year, since it's going to be hit or miss across the board. So as for starters, yes, my favorite subject. Contrary to what most coaches believe, it is not, your starters are not the people that are actually on the field for that first face-off. It's a little bit, I liken it to football. Your starters are not your kickoff team or whatever. It's your starters in terms of your 3 starting attackmen, your first offensive midfield, not face-off midfield, offensive midfielders, your 3 close defensemen, and your goalkeeper. It doesn't include your face-off guy, your short stick defensive midfielder. You have 2 of them, whatever. It is super simple. 3 attack, 3 offensive midfielders, 3 close defensemen, and your goalkeeper. Super easy. There are a lot of coaches that prefer that it be your face-off midfield. You can announce whatever your heart desires at your game, but for stat keeping purposes, so we can have it the same across the board, please use that lineup. Again, your offensive guys as your starters. Participation. John kind of mentioned it too. If you have an extra person that can keep participation, that's the best way to do it. If a visiting SID is there, just ask them. I'm sure that they will be more than happy to keep it. Do not try and keep it on the fly. I've seen a lot of people ask questions over the years about subs. I could not even imagine that. That would be wild, crazy, and you would probably miss about 10 goals along the way. So don't worry about trying to sub people in and out of the game. Just mark them down, keep a roster, cross them off, circle them, do whatever as they come in. And once they're in, you know that they have entered the game. One thing too that for those of you that don't keep stats directly on the field and you're maybe elevated like we are up in the press box, excuse me, if you could have the person that calls up your penalties let you know when there's a goalkeeper change, that's an easy one to miss. I'd also try and keep an eye on that between quarters. That's also a good time that a coach will make a change, and it's an easy time that you might miss someone. So if the person that's in your box that's doing penalties can also help you keep an eye on that, that would be super helpful.
I think participation is an underrated thing that people don't pay attention to enough, but we should be trying as host SIDs to try and maintain that to the best of our ability, not just for our team, but for the visiting team. I know it's difficult. We're a Division III school with a Division I sport, so I know the Division III world where there is sometimes one person doing stats for a lacrosse game, which it is challenging enough, and participation in that situation probably needs to be the last thing you're tracking. But certainly you should be trying to do it if at all possible. We're going to transition now to face-offs and talk a little bit about those, and we'll have Jerry kind of lead us through a little bit of a discussion there, and then we're going to start hitting some of these questions that we've received in the chat and the Q&A, and keep those coming. Really appreciate people who are chiming in with those. Jerry?
So every face-off in men's lacrosse has a winner and a loser. And if you're doing men's lacrosse and women's lacrosse, this is one of the places where it's radically different. So don't apply anything between the two sports. There's a winner and a loser of the face-off. So you'll enter the 2 people who are at the face-off X and then you enter the ground ball for the person who gains possession. Not every face-off will have a ground ball. There can be a face-off where there's a violation. There could be a face-off where the ball goes out of play without anybody getting possession. So you don't have to have a ground ball on every face-off. The winner of the face-off is entered, and he will get credited for a face-off win. The other player will get credited for a face-off loss. And then there's a ground ball that will be given if the ball is picked up by somebody. This is one of the only situations where you can have an uncontested ground ball count as a ground ball. For instance, if there's a man up face-off or just a face-off in general, and the face-off person controls it to one side where there's only one player on his team and there's nobody within 20 yards of him, he still gets the ground ball for picking it up in that situation. So statting face-offs are fairly easy. You get 2 face-off violations that don't result in a penalty. The third one results in a time-serving penalty, and each one after that, that's per half. So if I take the first 2 face-offs and I'm called for violations, and then Ernie takes the third one and he's called for a violation, it still counts as a team violation. They're not counting individual violations. That penalty is entered as a delay of game penalty, and it is awarded. It's you enter it for the team, not for the individual player. And officials are supposed to signal to the side if it's a violation or not, and it's sometimes a gray area. So, play can continue a bit without anybody gaining possession of the ball. And then there could be a loose ball pushed by somebody that's not a face-off violation. So the officials are supposed to look at the scores table and signal if it is a face-off violation or not. It is easy to lose track of that or not see it because the officials aren't great about it. That's not going to be your fault. But you'll notice on the third one, if they now all of a sudden have called thrown a flag, you'll realize it's the third one. And and that's about it on face-offs, right?
Yeah, so the big thing there is Jerry used the example of him committing 2 face-off violations and then me coming in and committing 1, and it's a team penalty. It's a team penalty even if Jerry commits all 3 of the violations. So it doesn't matter if it's 3 different guys or one guy 3 times. It is a team penalty, and we have a question in the chat about that.
It's
team
served
penalty.
It's served by the person who committed the penalized face-off violation. So even if I committed the first 2 and Ernie commits the third, Ernie serves that penalty. And then for the rest of the half, every face-off violation from there is another 30-second penalty, and it resets for the second half.
Yeah. So again, any face-off violation that becomes time serving, it doesn't matter who's in the box. It's a team penalty. It's credited against the team. So an individual will serve it. Somebody asked if it was the in-home or the face-off guy. It's the third face-off guy who took the penalty who will serve it, but it does not count against as a penalty against that individual.
And then there are some other things. One is if somebody scores a goal with 1.1 seconds left in the quarter, and they line up for a face-off, but nobody has possession of it when the horn goes off, then you don't enter the face-off. That doesn't count as a face-off. It's not like a dead ball rebound or something like that. And there could be violations committed before they ever line up. Those still count as face-offs. So like delay of game on a face-off counts as a face-off counts as a face-off. So you would enter a face-off even though there wouldn't be one.
And no ground ball in that situation, just a winning,
Correct.
just a winning person.
And if
So
there's sometimes you'll also see the person who wins the face-off. For instance, you can't carry the ball in the back of your stick. So if somebody does that, it appears that they won the face-off, got a ground ball. You've entered the face-off, you've entered the ground ball, and all of a sudden it becomes a face-off violation. That's not a turnover. That's a face-off violation.
Yeah, we have a good question here. If the scores table is marked down 3 face-off violations for a team in the half, of the referees signified to the table it is the second violation. Is it the responsibility of the scores table to stop the game and inform the referee? That answer is no. Regardless of whether or not we think we're 100% right, whatever the officials are going with is the way you have to go. What you would need to do is at quarter break, halftime, whatever the case may be, try and figure out which face-off you have marked as a violation that they did not count as a violation. It's going to be one of 3 if you've gotten to 3 and they haven't. What you don't want is at the end of the game, you have a box score with 3 face-off violations in a half, and you've not had a penalty served. So you want to make sure that you get that corrected before you move on and finalize everything with that game. So let's move on to shots and saves.
One thing
I
just wanted to throw in. There is one situation, and I'm getting a little ahead of ourselves, but there is one situation where the scorer is obligated to tell the game officials, and that is in lacrosse, if you get 5 minutes worth of major penalties, you foul out of the game. Now, I've been doing this since 1990. I've never seen anybody foul out of a game, but that does exist. That possibility does exist. And it's not 5 penalties. It's 5 minutes of major penalties. Now with like 2 and 3 minute penalties, it's possible. At that point, you are obligated to tell the official that, hey, number 26 has 5 minutes of major penalties.
That's a good point. Good point there, Jerry. Again, if you have questions, please don't use the chat function in the Zoom. Please go through the Q&A so we can keep everything together. That would be great. So we're going to move on now to shots and saves. And
one thing the question says, what if the ball goes out of bounds on a face-off? It is possessions given to the team that, whatever
whoever
team
is awarded possession
out, the other team gets possession and gets a face-off win, no ground ball.
No ground ball. That's the key. Yeah,
yes.
Just a face-off win. John, now we will move on to shots and saves. I've been trying to get to you, brother. I'm with you. But John Stark is going to talk a little bit about shots and saves and how to properly record those. John?
Thanks, Ernie. Shots are pretty clear. It's the intent to score. So lacrosse, it's a pretty easy thing to see. They are generally at the goal. It's not like soccer sometimes where you get a cross. It looks like it may be going towards the goal. There's very much an emphasis and generally a big wind up to pull through and shoot. It's a shot. Like it's when you see it kind of thing. Saves are a different matter. A save is any shot that the goalie prevents from going into the goal. If the goalie wasn't there, it would have been a goal. The goalie's there, that's a save. Doesn't matter where it hits them, if it goes off their foot, their stick, their helmet, their chest, any part of the goalie within the frame of the goal, anywhere inside of that 6x6. That's very important to note. That's a save. So probably a little bubble around that if it's, close, but use your discretion there. If it's way outside, like if this is the goalpost and the goalie's grabbing a shot over here, that's not going to be a save. We're going to call that probably a cause turnover and ground ball going back out the other way. The one big difference in official scoring and game officials in terms of shots on goal is what we define as a shot on goal, which is anything that is a goal or a save. The officials define that for purposes of resetting the clock is off the goal post. So if I shoot and it goes off the goal post behind Ernie, we're going to call that a shot 26 post. And there's a command for that in Stat Crew to do that. You'll see the officials reset it, but at most places, it's pretty clear when it goes off the goal. I know there's a couple goals around the country that you don't hear the ball come off. We're lucky here at the Dome. When it hits the goalpost, every single person in the Dome knows it. The whole goal rattles. You can hear it. They're mic'd up. So those are the big differences between shots and saves. Just because a goalie touches it doesn't make it a save. If somebody's throwing the ball flat across the crease to somebody on the backside and the goalie picks it off, that's not a save. It's going to be cause turnover, ground ball, and then a clear going out the other way.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing. You see it in soccer a lot when you get a box score back and the other team had 15 shots and there's 13 saves. Not every cross is a shot in soccer, so it's not a save. In lacrosse, it's the same way. If it's not on that goal, they shouldn't be getting credited with a save off a shot. Now, you can give them a little room if you can't really tell. Balls traveling 80, 90, sometimes 100 miles an hour. I couldn't tell if it was really going wide or not. If they reset it, I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt to the goalie. If it's 100% clear that it is wide, they shouldn't be resetting the clock. And that would be shot 26 wide, ground ball, home or visitor, for the goalie. Just like it would be if an attackman came up with the ball behind the goal, it would be a ground ball in that situation.
One thing too is
Yep.
You can shoot from anywhere on the field in men's lacrosse. There's you don't have to be just on offense. So a lot now, we see teams running a 10-man ride where the goalie comes out and covers an attackman, leaving the goal open. If a defenseman at the other end of the field winds up and takes a shot at the goal with the intent to score, we're calling that a shot. Whoever the defensive player was, whether it was a goalie or a pole, shorty, whatever, we're going to call that a shot. Left, right, high, crossbar, post, goal, save if the goalie gets back and makes a sprawling save. So you don't have to be on offense. It's not a sport like field hockey where you can only score and therefore can only have a shot inside of the arc. So you can score from anywhere on the field in men's lacrosse, and any player can too.
We have a question here. Can a stick saved by a goalie, a shot that is saved by the goalie and goes right into his stick, can be credited with a ground ball? A shot save, if you have a shot that is handled cleanly by a goalie, it's a save. It is not a ground ball. There can be instances where if it's not handled cleanly and the ball pops out of his stick and it becomes some sort of competitive situation in front of the goal, certainly you can credit a ground ball in that situation. But if I lob an easy one and Jerry saves it, Jerry gets a save, but not a save and a ground ball on that one. I'm going to hit a couple questions here, maybe not necessarily what we've hit. Do we need a team line in our roster file for stats? Yes, you do need a team line because there are instances where team stats are recorded, as we've noted on face-off violations. Can be a situation there. So you do want to create a person, so to speak, as a team entry. And I don't know how that works in Presto. I'm only speaking for Stat Crew, and I know Stacy, John, and Jerry also use Stat Crew, but that is very helpful to have in your roster there. Shot blocked by defense, always a block, or is there ever a team save? John, you want to hit that one?
Yeah, there is a team save in men's lacrosse. It's a player that is behind the goalie that makes a save. It does not get credited to that individual, but it is a shot 26, and then team save. So I believe it's T in Stat Crew for that save. And if you look at the bottom, it'll show the entry commands as well. So if there's ever a question, most of the time, the really high-level stuff for Stat Crew will be right across the bottom for results. But yes, there is. If it's in front of the goalie, if I'm the goalie and Ernie steps in and soaks a shot, it's going to be shot, visitor, block. If Ernie is behind me and I'm out trying to play the ball and someone scoops it up and comes in, Ernie comes in and makes a save, shot, visiting team, team save.
Yeah, the one thing about that, though, the defender has to be in the crease. So if the defender's out of the crease, it's not.
Yeah.
And it's not like field hockey where you enter the number of the player who had the save. It's just a team save. And in that situation, if he's out of the crease, the defender gets a ground ball in addition to the shot being blocked.
All right, so let's move on to another tricky one has changed through the years, and that is clears. And we'll have John just kind of walk us through again, kind of the way that those are statted. I know that can be a challenging one on the men's side.
Yeah, so clears are a really important metric for showing going from defense back over to offense. And the one key factor in that is where that possession starts. The ball needs to travel below the defensive restraining line to begin a clear. So from a face-off, if your guy wins it out to the wing and you get back on offense, there's no clear there. But if your face-off guy goes backwards, passes it to the goalie below the restraining line, and then you come back up the other field, that is now starting a clear. There's 3 ways to satisfy a successful or unsuccessful clear. Possessing the ball below midfield where after 20 seconds have elapsed on the shot clock. So we all now have big game clocks that show shot clock. So anytime that is below 60, if you complete a pass to a teammate, that is going to satisfy being a clear. And if you take a shot, that is also going to satisfy a clear as well. And I think those are the really big parts of that. So again, it's got to start below the defensive restraining line and then come back out. So when you're entering that in Stat Crew, You're going to hit L and you're going to start the team. And then if there's a turnover, there's already the turnover function built in there. So you can just hit T and it'll start your turnover process, whether that's a pass that's out of bounds or somebody gets pushed out of bounds, and then you're giving cause turnover. And I believe we touch on turnovers and cause turnovers down the road.
We do. Jerry, Stacy, anything else of note on clears that you wanted to point out? I know that they seem simple, and then you start scoring them, and chaos can ensue.
I mean, the clearing rules have changed so much in the last few years that the clearing stats don't tell you what they used to tell you. But for now, that's the way they're kept.
Yeah.
The one big note for the for some of the people that have been scoring for a while, just because you touch it into the restraining box on the offensive end, that's no longer satisfying that unless it's below 20 seconds or you pass the teammate that's below that as well.
Not the restraining line. The restraining line has nothing to do with
Nothing
the
to do. It's just midfield now.
Right.
midfield line.
Yeah.
You can go across midfield and come back as many times as you want in the first 20 seconds of a possession. So
Sure.
The other thing, and we scrimmaged the other night, and I had my 2 students with me to kind of get them back in the flow. In the middle of a clear, you can start to have ball on the ground and ground balls awarded. You have to try and figure out what's the best way for you to record that. We usually escape from the clear, and like if I'm clearing, I pass it to Jerry, it gets checked away from him, and then a scramble ensues, and then Jerry picks it up, and we want to credit him with a ground ball. I usually will escape from the clear, give him the ground ball, and then restart the clear. You just have to figure out what works best for you in order to kind of like get yourself through that situation. But clears can be, especially if a team is 10 manning, it can get a little hectic down there for sure when they're riding like that. Let's talk a little bit about penalties and extra man goals. Jerry, if you want to just talk a little bit about how we administer those, multiple penalties at once. And I'm sure Stacy, John, and I have some things we can chime in on here as well.
So to try to be as quick as possible, obviously, if one team has more players on the field than the other because of a penalty, they're man up. So it's an extra man situation. If it's a non-releasable penalty, then you can get credit for more than one extra man opportunity depending on what happens. So if you have a 2-minute non-releasable penalty and you score a goal 40 seconds into it, that's going to become a second extra man opportunity, whether or not you win the face-off to get the ball back. So you can get the penalty, you can score off the penalty, lose the face-off, you're still playing man up. So and if you score 3 goals, you could have 4 man up opportunities on the same one. Where it gets tricky is with both teams having penalties. So if both teams are penalized, that's not a man up opportunity. If one team is penalized and then penalized again, that's not a second man up opportunity unless the first penalty ends before the second one, in which case it becomes a second man up opportunity. It's sort of common sense. I hope that's not confusing the way I'm explaining it. If one player commits 2 violations and gets 2 penalties, that's different than if one player if 2 players commit one penalty each. 2 players who commit 1 penalty each, that's 1 extra man opportunity. 1 player committing 2 is 2 extra man opportunities. Make sure you credit extra man goals. You can be credited with an extra man goal even after the penalty time is up if the defense has not gotten back into the play. That is the scorer's discretion. So you'll be seeing, number 33 is released from the midline and he's trying to get back in the play, and the other team scores before he gets anywhere near the play, even though that he was back on the field, that still could be considered an extra man goal. Also, there are man down goals, so be aware of that. It's easy to forget that because, there's a penalty and it clears, and now you forget that the other team is still a man up, and then the other team scores. You have to make sure you credit that as a man down goal.
Yes, there's a lot of moving parts with penalties and extra man goals and how you score all of those. I was answering a couple in the chat here, just one-off questions, but one of the things, at least in Stat Crew, and again, I don't know how you do this in Presto, John commits a 3-minute non-releasable penalty and we score a minute in, and we now have extra man for 2 more minutes. At the end of the 3 minutes, you're going to determine how many extra man opportunities are to be awarded in that situation. Because if you score 1 minute in and we have the ball for 2 more, or if we score 1 minute in and we have the ball for 2 more minutes and we score again, we're not going to be 2 for 1. We're not going to be 3 for 1. You're almost always going to end up with at least as many opportunities on a non-releasable penalty as you have goals. And in many instances, you're going to end up 2 for 3, 3 for 4. If there's extra time left at the end of that, after you score your second, third, whatever goal in a 3 minute, even 1 minute non-releasable penalty situation, if there's enough time to have successfully gained possession, or possession was available to you, you're going to end up 1 for 2, 2 for 3, 3 for 4, so to speak. One thing you should know in that situation, if it's say it's a 1 minute non-releasable penalty, and we score at the 41-second mark, and there's a face-off and we don't win it, it is not 1 for 1. It is 1 for 2. Just because we didn't win the face-off doesn't mean we didn't have a chance to win the face-off, and your coaches will push back on this hard. But it is anything above 10 to 12 seconds, that is, you're probably crediting your team or the other team with an extra attempt that is going to be a fail. That can be a point of contention with coaches, just so you know. We did have a question here I wanted to get to real quickly. Are clears tracked while a team is shorthanded? So that's a great question, actually. So if I have an extra man opportunity, we shoot, John's goalie makes a save and they start to clear. If they clear it successfully, it is a successful clear. If we ride back and they fail to clear it, it doesn't count as a failed clear. It does count as a turnover, but you're not counting it as a failed clear. It's kind of like, I equate it to like icing in hockey. If you're shorthanded, you don't get called for icing. It's a little different than that, but that's the closest analogy that that I can come up with. Where can we find what penalties are releasable and non-releasable? That's a great question. The officials will tell you immediately if it's non-releasable. If it's a non-releasable penalty, they will communicate that to the scorers table. You may or may not know, but a lot of times they will tell you. They're all non-releasable until they're all releasable until you are told they are non-releasable, is probably the way that I would best determine how you can figure that out.
You'll see the officials on non-releasable penalties. They will give the safety sign. They'll put their hands up over their head to let everyone know that that's going to be a non-releasable
That's true. Yep.
penalty.
If there are another question, if there are only a few extra seconds on a non-releasable penalty, then no emo. If there's a 1 minute non-releasable penalty, if we don't score until 56 seconds, that's going to be 1 attempt. Because even if we won the face-off, realistically, we did not have an opportunity, to score again. And there's always those caveats. I will say this, 55 seconds in, we score a goal. Probably most times I'm not crediting us with another attempt until our faceoff guy wins the faceoff cleanly and runs down and scores and takes a shot. And then I have to credit us with another one because he got a shot off. So there's always the gray area involved in there. Stacy, how about we hit, and I know we're at 2:50, so we probably have about 15 minutes left, but this is great stuff. Stats with a flag down. How about you just touch on that real quickly for us?
Sure. So most of your offensive stats will count. The only defensive stat that you can give is a save. If I have the ball and Jerry checks it away from me and picks it up, he does not get a caused turnover. I do not get a turnover. There's no ground ball because I still retain the ball because of the penalty. So if you can kind of keep that in mind, that will help you. Turnovers and caused turnovers. Caused turnovers is probably one of the most misunderstood, misstated, that's not really a word, but I'm going to make it a word today, stat that we have. It's not a checks and balances. Just because you have a turnover does not mean that somebody forced a turnover. You have to deserve a turnover. or excuse me, a cause turnover. Just because I'm face guarding you and I chuck the ball away, that doesn't necessarily mean that I get a cause turnover. So just be careful with that. We've seen some really crazy numbers in terms of cause turnovers, which kind of leads me to believe that people maybe don't understand the rule. But again, just because you have a turnover does not mean that there has to be a caused turnover. I can't remember. Do we have shot clock stuff in here? One of the things with the shot clock, if it's running down and you often see a player just roll it into a corner to let the time just go because they can't get anything off. It is a turnover. It is a team turnover. It does not go to the kid that rolls it in the corner, chucks it in the corner for those purposes. That's
And
done on purpose. Go ahead,
if you're
Jake.
scoring that correctly, you're not entering it as a turnover anyway, at least in Stat Crew. And again, I apologize, I don't know the code in Presto. You're going to enter V for violation, and it's not even, and it's going to ask you for a team. It's not even going to ask you for a player number in that situation. So as long as you're scoring it correctly, the option to give it to a player wouldn't even exist. It would just be a team entry on those shot clock violations. That's a good point there.
It's a very good point because you don't want to double up on number of turnovers you're giving any one team for that.
Right.
For sure.
I want to jump back real quick. Somebody asked the question about extra man. I want to go back in it. No extra man when leading team has advantage in final minute of a game and does not attempt to score. That is correct. And there's no set time on that. It's not if it happens in the last 20 seconds, in the last 10, in the last 40. If in the scorer's discretion, you determine that you're winning by 4, your team draws a penalty, and you're just killing the clock, by all means, we don't penalize the offensive team for making no attempt to go to the goal or shoot until the guy on your third midfield decides he's going to take a shot. And as soon as he does that, then it has to be. So if you make an attempt to score in any way, it has to count as an attempt. But normally, if you're just running out the clock, no, you would just change the Y to N and change that. Real quickly on extra mans, one other thing in Stat Crew, people have asked us all through the years is you have a penalty at the end of the first quarter. They hold the ball. There's no face off in the second. And the penalty actually really kind of takes place in the second quarter. When you get the code to enter the penalty, you're going to hit Y for extra man normally. Instead of hitting Y, hit plus. And if you hit plus in that situation, it will record the stat in the second quarter and not the first. So you're not going to see on your box score 1 for 0 in the first quarter or 0, whatever. However, I guess it would be 1 for 0, but it will count it. It will record the stat in the second quarter for you for those penalties that carry over.
One thing about extra man and what Ernie was talking about with not having it count as an extra man opportunity, that only can happen if the defense is not pressuring. So if the defense, if you're up by 1 and there's 20 seconds to go and you're trying to run the clock out and you're man up and the other team is chasing you all over the field, that's an extra man opportunity. If the defense has to be passive. And the other thing is it can't happen at any other point of the game. So if you're up by 4, they're up by 3 and there's 4 minutes to go and you get a man up and you just want to kill the time, that still counts as an extra man opportunity.
Again, I know we're getting tight on time, so let's hit a couple more of these quickly. So using video after the game or the next day. Jerry, you want to just hit on that quickly for us?
Yeah, so when I started and nobody had video, everybody would say the next day, well, my coach said we should have 3 more ground balls and 4 more saves, and that's great, but I'm not changing the stats. Now, if somebody says to me we should have 2 more saves, I will say to them, show me on the video where show me where in the game you think you should have more saves, and I'll go back and look. And it's one thing if we credited number 11 with the assist and it was really number 17, but we got the number wrong. That's an obvious change. It's another thing when you get into judgment calls, especially things like ground balls. Was it a caused turnover? Did he never have possession? Those kinds of things, and also shots and saves. It's up to you. Now, I know this is tough if you're just starting out and you're in your early 20s and the coach is coming to you saying, change the thing, we need 2 more saves. But you have to say no. You know, I'm the scorer, and in my discretion, there wasn't a save and we're not changing it. But you can go back and change it if you feel that there's compelling video evidence. You can't do it 4 months later. You have to do it in a reasonable amount of time. You want to define reasonable as 24 to 48 hours. Okay. But you can use video to help you stat. One thing, and I'm not, I apologize, John, if you said this, but on clears, a lot of teams now are taking shots from the other side of midfield if a team is 10 manning. And if you take a shot and it doesn't, if you take a shot and it goes wide or it goes in, but you think it's a shot from the other side of midfield, you have to give a successful clear and you have to give a shot. It's something we're talking about on the rules committee about whether or not that should be legal to shoot from the other side of midfield. But for now, that counts as a shot and a successful clear. Even if it's a shot that the other team is backed up, so you lose possession, you still took a shot. So it still counts as a successful clear.
Yeah, that's the key. Even if the other team gets it, it's not a turnover if you've determined that it's a shot and the other team backs it up. Once you record shot, there's no turnover there if the goalie or a defender on the other team backs it up. Couple little random points here, recording accurate times for goals and penalties. So we had a question early on. How do you handle when plays get chaotic and fast and you miss something and make a mistake? Do you move on and find it or fix it later or try and adjust when you can in the moment? One, I would keep up with the play. I would keep up with the play as much as you can and just note, always have, paper with you, ground ball, home 26 at, the 11-minute mark. The one thing about lacrosse is 99% of the time, no one's going back and looking at the play-by-play. So if you're a few seconds off when you go back and just manually enter that's okay. If you miss a turnover, cause turnover, and you have your video stream, you can go back and get it. I wouldn't focus so much on who had that cause turnover and miss 4 things going on in transition. I would get the things going on in transition, ask somebody in the press box, hey, I need that defender's number behind the goal. I can't watch right now. And they'll mark it down and you can go back and add that later. So keep up with the play. And then you can always go back in and enter those things later. And if you're a few seconds off, again, nobody for the most part is using a play-by-play in lacrosse. That said, times for goals and penalties should always be recorded by what happened, what is on the scoreboard at the time. Those 2 things should have an accurate time marked in your box score. So make sure those 2 things are always recorded correctly. Goalie changes. Recording the time whenever you have a goalie change. Stacy hit on that earlier. I think watch timeouts, watch end of quarter situations. Sometimes teams have, especially if you're no visiting SID, sometimes teams will have a goalie that comes in man down situations or end of the game situations when they are going to chase. They may use a different goalie. You always have to have a goalie on the field, even if they're on the other side of midfield. Jerry, empty net goals, your favorite?
There are none.
Exactly.
There are no empty net goals in lacrosse. Your goalie can come out of the rules say that somebody on the field has to be the goalie. So you have to have a goalie on the field at all times. If you're down by a goal, there's 40 seconds to go out of a timeout. You could put the goalie on the other side of midfield and play with 7 defenders, 7 non-goalies on the defensive end. If they break free and they're uncontested to the goal and they throw it in the goal, it still counts against the goalie. It's unfortunate, but those are the rules. There's no empty net goals in lacrosse.
With that, how about own goals? John, when would you decide a goal was an own goal compared to when a goal was not an own goal?
I mean, it's a play where the defender throws the ball back into the goal. They're pretty rare for lacrosse. They do happen sometimes in clears if a defender is throwing the ball back to where they think the goalie should be and the goalie's not there and it goes in. It's going to be an own goal. So that goes in as shot, visitor, team.
Yep.
Team. There's nothing. It's not the closest person to it, or it's not the last offensive player to touch the ball. It just goes in as team. There's no shot credited, and Stacker knows that too. But you do have to start it with the shot, and then you just put in team.
Put in team as the entry. Yeah. So if I take a shot and Jerry is a defender in front of the goal and hits off Jerry, as long as the momentum of the shot is what propels it into the goal, I'm going to get that goal. The defender has to literally throw the ball back into the goal for it to be an own goal. Overtime ending a game. Games go to overtime, and we're playing Syracuse and they score 1 minute and 42 seconds into overtime. When you end the game, and I cannot say this for Stat Crew, so I'm not sure exactly. I mean, for Presto, when you end the period ending time should be how much time is on the scoreboard. So 2:34 left in the first overtime or 3:11 left in the second overtime. If you just end the period at 0, it's going to make it a 64-minute game for a 1 overtime game, a 68-minute game for a 2 overtime game. And that's going to mess up your goalie minutes played, and it's going to, have an effect on their goals against average. So you want to make sure that the end time of the game in overtime is whatever time is on that scoreboard. Goalie should play 61:32, not 64 minutes if the game ended 1:32 or whatever the case may be, into overtime. Talked a little bit about hectic plays. A suggestion, just we use students a lot to input. I do use my assistant a lot as well, but we use students. And what I try and do is when I call, I try and almost like slow down. They can only input so quickly. I know things are happening quickly, but try and be deliberate in your call. You're watching the play. They probably are not. So give them a chance to keep up with you and just be deliberate in your call. If they tell you they missed something, again, hopefully you have a person there that can jot something down, or you can jot it down. You can always go back and reinsert a ground ball, a caused turnover, whatever the case may be. Someone did ask a question about a sheet that apparently existed a few years ago that had a description of the differences in the different stats for men's and women's lacrosse, where it might be the same name, ground balls, for instance. I am not familiar with that sheet. Are any of you guys familiar with that sheet, like a cross-reference sheet between the two? I apologize. Whoever asked that question, I would call out your name, but we have a lot of anonymous attendees, so I'm not sure exactly who it was, but I don't have an answer to that question. I would say just familiarize yourself with both stat manuals as best you can to figure out the differences in those key stats that we have
It
differences
looks like
on.
Ernie may have put that in the Q&A stat sheet that goes to the Eastcom.
It was Jill.
EC.
Yep.
Oh. Whole 2 feet behind Ernie.
She is right behind door number 2 over here in my office. So I'll grab that from her and now I'll know about it. Can you go over ground balls after a shot that goes wide? Are they given only on a change of possession or if contested? So that's an interesting one. Jerry, you want to handle that one?
Yeah, so a shot that goes wide and goes out of bounds, there's no ground ball. I think in women's there is, right? If the other team backs it up.
Just input whatever Jill tells me to input. I don't know.
No, there's no ground ball given on a shot that goes wide and goes out of bounds. If I take a shot that goes wide and the defense is nearest to it, that's not a turnover. There are people who think it should be a turnover, but it's not a turnover. If I take a shot, hits the pipe, and rolls all the way back towards midfield, and I'm the only one, somebody on my team's the only one there, and they pick it up, that's still a ground ball, even if it's not contested in that case. It's one of the few cases where if it's not contested, you can give a ground ball.
I think one thing that we touched on briefly with ground balls, on a caused turnover, if you pick a pass out of the air, if Ernie's throwing to Jerry and I reach up and I grab the ball, I get both a caused turnover. Ernie gets charged with the turn. So turnover, Ernie, caused by me, and I get a ground ball. And if we're in the defensive third, then we're starting a clear back out the other way. So important to note that if you pick off a pass, you're getting a caused turnover and a ground ball.
Yeah, ball does not have to be on the ground to get a ground ball. That's a good point, John. There can be some confusion with that. Going all the way back to the beginning, how does lacrosse submit starters? Soccer has their paper submit, basketball has the official book. There is really no official form for lacrosse to submit your starters. We go down to the field. I get the starters from the coaches, and we enter them into the stat program. We don't keep a book. We don't keep a score sheet. We do nothing like we used to. I think back when we all started, we still did some paper stuff back there or down at the table, but there's no official form for you to gain starters from your coaches, just a roster sheet or a flip card or whatever you're using, and you take them up and record them that way.
I think important to note with starters too, when you're talking to the coach, is to find out who their in-home is going to be. if there are like a bench penalty or something where the in-home is going to serve that, because that's not going to get assigned to the player. That's going to be team, but somebody has to serve that. So good to find out who the in-home is.
Yeah, that's an important thing because there are bench penalties. There are reasons the in-home is somebody that is identified to the officials. And when they identify a penalty as being served by the in-home, the biggest thing is to remember it is not a penalty on that person. You're in-home at the end of the season. It's going to be an attackman. Unlikely that they actually had 17 penalties for 21 minutes. Not impossible, but probably unlikely. So the in-home penalty is not scored against him, but he is the person that has to serve it based on the coach identifying him before the game.
And this year, one of the points of emphasis for officials, and I don't know how closely they're going to follow this, but is sideline conduct, and they're supposed to really be cracking down. So that could lead to more penalties for in-homes.
True. Good point, Jerry. Again, thank you. So I know we've drifted a little bit past 3. I feel like Stacy, John, Jerry, and I could probably talk about this for another hour, but really appreciate it. We were up near 150 and over 150 people with us all through this hour. Really think it was a great opportunity. Please look us up on our websites. If you have any questions at any point during the season, if something comes up, don't hesitate to email any of us. And if we don't have an answer, I'll email John. John will email Stacy, and then we'll all check with Jerry and make sure we have it right. So we'll make sure that we get everything answered. Don't be afraid to reach out to somebody on this panel or Ryan at Loyola. Always happy to help.
Before we jump off, there's just one more question.
Yep.
Could we tell coaches that anyone with a significant number of starts is not eligible for postseason honors as a specialist? If for instance, your faceoff guy is also in your first midfield offensively, which doesn't happen as much as it used to, but it still happens, he'll get credited with game started, but he'll also be a faceoff specialist. So that's fine. And then if you get the visiting starting lineup entered and we notice it's basically their faceoff unit, should we try to correct it? Do this all the time. See this many times a year. We will just change the starters to their first offensive midfield group instead of the faceoff unit. Personally, don't really care who we announce. Actually, we don't even announce starters anymore. So we'll just change it to their first offensive midfield and attack, defense, and goalie. But there's a lot of coaches that refuse to say who their first offensive midfield is because they're so wedded to their starters or their face-off group. So that's fine. I'm not fighting any coaches on the field about starters before the game.
No. All right. Well, one, I'd like to bring us to a close here. I want to thank John and Stacy and Jerry for serving on this panel today. Again, it was time well spent as we prepare to start our seasons. I hope all of you who tuned in really gained a lot. And again, please, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'd like to thank Maria, Barb, and Will from CSC as well for putting this together. Really a great opportunity for us in lacrosse to do this. Again, this webinar will be available later today on demand on the CSC website, as well as the YouTube page. Please check the collegesportscommunicators.com for updated information on what's on tap in terms of CSC programming and continuing education. They're doing a great job trying to help us do our jobs. Let's take advantage of the services that they are presenting, not just in sports statistics and sport webinars, stat rule webinars, but they'll continue with those through the spring. Next up on CSCU committee, we'll have an emerging professionals webinar. That'll take place on Tuesday, February 6th at 7 p.m. So I encourage everybody who's just getting started or younger to please take advantage of that opportunity. Look forward to talking to all of you through the season. Good luck as your seasons begin, and thanks again for joining us.